Ayse, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I prepared a sort of talk for 20 minutes, but I will start from the second half after summarizing the first part in a couple of sentences. Thank you very much for the presentations. It gave me a lot of things to think about, especially the necessity or importance of elections in the democracy, because Turkey was always proud of how the participation in the elections is high. You know, we have never had an election with lesser than 85% participation in Turkey. But for now, after experiencing last year's, I should say the participation, the high participation rates to the elections shows there is no other way for the democracy. So it is not a good quality for democracy, because if people don't need to go to vote, it means maybe they have some other ways to have a say about their lives. That's why I'm not sure if highlighting the importance of vote is that much good. I wanted to talk about the tricks today, not about the tricks, but how the frauds in elections are legitimized in Turkey. First, I wanted to talk about the tricks, the types of tricks. There are three types of tricks that frauds actually I categorized. First is the monopolization of the media. By monopolizing media, the government has power to suspend the freedom of speech, actually, freedom of propaganda also. And it works a lot. According to the official numbers, there are thousands of media outlets in Turkey, but only 40 of them are, let's say, prominent in the scenery. And in the presentation, in the little picture, you can see those big dots. They are the media monopolies and how they are connected to the other sectors like construction, energy, also the mega projects planned and projected by the government and held by these companies. So how the media network is connected among each other, also to the government. I also should add something else. Most of these media networks are also using World Bank money credits to build projects like bridges, thermal projects, also highways, with the public-private partnerships. So it is like a kind of internationally funded monopolization of media, assisting the authoritarianism of Erdogan in Turkey. The second one is a kind of childish one, but it is very common in Turkey. It is repeated. It is done in almost every election. It is the play with the technicalities of the elections. I mean, you know, for example, changing the rules of the elections in just before the counting of the votes. For example, it happened in 2017 for the during the process of referendum for the constitution, and it was really, you know, obvious because until that election, it was the unstamped ballots were not counted in the elections, in the previous elections, but for that referendum, the electoral committee, the Supreme Electoral Committee, decided yes, they are valid, and then, you know, they got the constitution. But it is not very easy to constitute the legitimacy of the constitution and so on. You know what happens after that. The elections are not very good idea for kind of wounded and incomplete democracies, I should say, because each election becomes a kind of occasion for the ruling party, for the ruling powers, let's say, to consolidate their party organization, but also their affectual power, let's say, affectual or emotional power, emotional manipulation, because the atmosphere of election, the atmosphere of harsh competition for the power opens a lot of place for kind of manipulation of the emotions of the citizens. And in the second part, I want to talk about that. And these, I want to focus on two main feelings, that is envy and resentment. After here, I will try to read from my paper. Yeah, the third one, you know, how and why the ruler, why Erdogan, why the AKP is utilizing these emotions, I should say, it is to polarize the society. So you can create a sort of us and them division in society through those feelings. But those feelings, as long as they are legitimized with the how to say, rewriting of history, legitimizing also the tricks, also the frauds over not only elections but also other democratic procedures. The political polarization in Turkey has two primary fault lines in that sense. First, religious versus secular, and the second, Turks versus non-Turks. There are more, but for our discussion, it is enough to mention today. Until 2015, especially after Gezi resistance in 2013, the AKP played with the religious versus secular fault line. For instance, when we are all in Gezi Park and many protests going on every single city of Turkey except my family's hometown, Bayburt, Erdogan said, "I barely could keep my 50% home." It was his way to threat the secular half of the society. I will not discuss if he has 50% or not, and it doesn't matter, I think. This claim was enough to understand how he would continue with his leadership later. After the AKP understood the religious versus secular fault line is not enough to keep 50% with them, they began, since 2015, they began to utilize the second one, Turks versus everybody else. So welcome nationalism back. Frankly speaking, the second fault line has always been much more useful in Turkey. In their first years, the AKP tried to keep Kurds with them during the peace process, so-called peace process in Turkey, to fill the first fault line with more energy to slow down the effect of the Turks versus everybody else division. However, it didn't provide enough votes. I mean, the religiosity, secularity division was not enough powerful, was not enough strong. That's why they invited nationalism back to the show. Now I want to focus on two main political effects in these divisions. They are envy and resentment. Both of these effects are common and unfortunately easily shareable, as they are born in humanly comparisons. That is why they are political in their nature. Not resentment, but envy only in smaller doses could help us to institutionalize a just society. At least Helmut Schoeck, an Austrian-German sociologist, claims that thanks to their struggle to discipline the envy, humankind could invent the imaginations like democracy and socialism. But our problem, what does happen if we do not discipline envy? The worst case, if someone uses envy to gain political power. Envy is a little bit different than jealousy. While jealousy is all about to protect what belongs to us, envy focuses more on what others have. There's a Muslim moralist who lived in the 16th century, Kınalızade Ali Efendi, in his masterpiece, Ahlak-ı Âlâ, The Sublime Morality. He writes that envy is possible, this is very interesting, only among the equals. It happens when equals compare themselves to each other. This equality seems, in Turkish we call it haset, So it is from Arabic. This equality seems all about legal or moral conditions, like we are all humans or citizens, so why should some people be more prosperous than others? But when I look at what Ali Efendi wrote a little bit closer, I found it is not that much very easy. He is talking about equal conditions, not about rights and responsibilities. For example, he says those people live in different cities or gain their lives with different professions do not envy each other. They could admire or emulate to the ones in better conditions. For the poor, they could feel compassion, or they could be afraid from or hate from poorer or richer. But these are different feelings. Envy happens among the similars who equally share something. For Melanie Klein, envy begins among siblings as they share their mother's breast. For Ali Efendi, envy is about the other's part, not mine. And it happens when we have the capacity to get equal parts from the commonwealth. It doesn't matter if we have something more or less than the others. The matter energizing envy is the commonality of the source, not the size or shape or even the value of that thing. I will give an example how envy is being legitimized to legitimize that harsh competition, not undemocratic competition in Turkey among different political camps, let's say. This is a quotation from a viral anonymous writer, pro-AKP writer. I think he was not a writer, but a group of people wanted to legitimize Turkey's intervention in Syria, but how he is using envy to legitimize that politics is really interesting. He says, quoting, "The war has been existing since Abel and Cain and will be existing until the apocalypse. The stupid heads who forget Allah examined Moses and his followers with war, and the nations who do not war are destined to die. Those countries do not want war will be like Egypt, Syria, and Iraq. This country, Turkey, will fight not only until we get Aleppo, Mosul, and Kirkuk, but also till justice rule the whole world. If Turks do not accept this mission, it will be given to another nation. If this task is taken out our hands, our nation cannot survive." Now, the subject of the envy is something like a curse, but still he is envious about that. And that curse will provide a sort of power to nation for him. Another example I will give from Erdogan's speech of Erdogan. This speech was given to Imam Hatip schools, those religious schools in Turkey, that now Erdogan uses these religious schools to build his religious generation. But first, Imam Hatip schools, Imam Hatip high schools in Turkey was established by the secular party. So he reminds this story to his youngsters, and then the Imam Hatip graduates, an association of Imam Hatip graduates, and then how he is boosting envy and resentment together is really interesting, I should say. I'm quoting, "They opened these schools to train people to wash the corpses to make them ghazals. That's the reason our teacher asked us, are you going to be a corpse washer? Someone they wanted to be ghazal became the president. Imam Hatip graduates came to all the positions in this country that those seculars, couldn't accept. It is better to be oppressed 1,000 times than to be a tyrant once." While he was, this speech was given last year in September, while he was talking, while he was giving this speech, 70,000 students were in jail, in prisons of Turkey. So how he is also legitimizing that fact via this how to say, envious speech he gives to his people, let's say. And there is also a tragicomic aspect of envy about consumption. I will give a last example regarding that aspect of envy, and then I will finish. This lady, this quote is from one of the interviews I did during my PhD in a higher class religious gated community in Istanbul. And the lady is a sort of life coach, let's say, easing polygamous men's burden by setting unofficial but secret contracts among their wives. You know, she has such a profession. And I'm quoting, "It is true that religious women devote themselves to shopping. I want to drive the best car, live in the most luxurious house, wear the best dress. It doesn't mean I waste my money. In this case, it is something else. If God gives me this life as a gift, I'm responsible for taking care of it in the best way. God will not question me about why my husband didn't love me or cheated on me, but God will ask why I didn't like myself." So I mean, envy is now sort of legitimizing that sort of consumption, and she is actually a kind of building a sort of theology of envy. And my conclusion, my last paragraph: for many people like this lady, the AKP is a provider and guarantor of this heavenly life in the profane world. Thus, whenever somebody complains about what the AKP and Erdogan do, for example, in the elections, another type of resentment rises, the resentment of rich and the oppressor to the poor and oppressed. It is possible to hear such sentences in the street interviews made with the pro-AKP people. "Hey, I know you are envious about what we have because you have nothing. We have Erdogan, you do not have a leader, even a leader." It is just a vicious circle and needed to be broken as soon as possible. There is also a sort of envy in this type of resentment, that is the envy towards the moral superiority of the enemy, as these guys know how their enemies feel, because they were in their enemy's place just a couple of decades ago. What stops them being a little bit more empathetic with the poor and their competitors is obvious. They instinctively know how strong those feelings are, and that is why they are afraid. That fear increases the dose of resentment. Never ends, but yeah, maybe we can discuss and find a way to end these hard feelings. Thank you very much for listening.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ayse. You kind of like really presented like very baroque picture behind the governance and election processes of Erdogan. It's a lot to unpack, really. When we speak about election, we somehow always think that we have in mind those voters that can and want and able to vote. But the reality is more complex than that. There are communities that still don't have full access to expressing their political will, and their voices often suppressed and unheard.